We're in the TechCrunch studio today with Matt Thompson, who's a designer and developer at Heroku. Matt, welcome to the studio.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So previously you were at Koala leading mobile on iOS for the team, and now you're at Heroku. Heroku's been very successful as a web development platform. How does the company and how do you think about mobile in this environment?
Right, that's an interesting challenge with Heroku because web and mobile are so different that apps are sandboxed, and we don't really have the ability to publish directly to the App Store. That's just a limitation of the web. However, all apps, or a lot of apps, really interact with web in significant ways through APIs. Heroku can definitely help out with that.
So as a mobile developer, what is Heroku offering? Let's say you're building an iPhone app or an Android app. How does Heroku make that world better?
Right. So the main value proposition is more time developing your app and less time developing everything else. So your app is your product. The way that it works, those are sort of implementation details. Your customer doesn't really care about that as much as the app being a wonderful experience. So all the stuff behind the scenes, the API that powers it, making sure everything can scale to your web audience, those are details that should be really left invisible. They should just work, and Heroku's an excellent way to do that.
Is there any application either that you use as a user that you saw over the last couple of years that really understands that paradigm where you say, look, use the tools that help you do all the stuff in the back end and just create an experience for the user and focus on the design or the interaction around that?
Right. I think GroupM is a big success story for Heroku. They used our platform to launch very successfully at South by Southwest.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been hugely successful so far. So they were able to build up so quickly because of Heroku being able to scale to a massive audience, how it goes at South by Southwest.
Yes. So now, what is it that Heroku makes web development a lot easier for developers, right, in order to focus on maybe more consumer-facing parts of their product, right? What does that mean on a larger scale for innovation? Does it, how do you view the world that way?
Right. So, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, at the base of the pyramid, you have your basic biological needs. You have to, eat and breathe and drink water to be able to survive. But really what we're interested in is that top part of the pyramid, that transcendent, philosophical, doing things that are truly meaningful. So I think if Heroku is kind of taking care of the lower parts of the pyramid, you never really have to think about, routing your application or making sure it stays up or it's able to scale. It's just effortless deployment, and it allows you to focus on the big ideas.
And so, let's talk a little bit more about that, because you were mentioning that part of the rite of passage of being a web developer or being a hacker is to kind of focus on technical challenges that are really, really hard. And part of what you're saying, I'm hearing, is that some of those are either repeatable or have been done before, or trying to reinvent the wheel in ways that maybe aren't as necessary or advancing.
Right, exactly. It's kind of a contradiction of the whole hacker ethos.
So can you just kind of unravel that?
Sure. So it's ironic that the hacker ethos is or virtue of it is that you solve a problem once and you solve it, for good, right? But kind of on the other side of that is there's a sort of machismo attitude that we have as once we get to the top, once we figure out those hard problems, figure out how to do technically difficult things, that we're not as interested in helping other people solve those technical problems. I think that's unfortunately kind of a flaw in our species, and something that we need to constantly remind ourselves of in order to overcome.
And so how does Heroku fit into that?
Right. So yeah, kind of in more practical terms, it's difficult. It was it was needlessly difficult to provision a server, to get all of your DNS routing up, to make your application work, to manage your dependencies. Programming is hard enough. Why complicate it with all of these, rites of passage, all these rituals? By getting all of those things away, we're trivializing the problem to the point where it doesn't actually exist anymore.
And so does that trivialization also render some people who are web developers or work they're doing, in some cases, whether they're using Heroku or a similar platform, a competitor platform, does it render some of their skills less useful?
I don't think so. I think, there's still, right now, there's still a need for DevOps people. There's still people that are needed to run servers because, of course, Heroku's not exactly for everybody. It's for a lot of people, but at some point you reach a scale where it does actually make sense to have your own DevOps people and to run your own servers. But for the mass majority of people, that's probably some detail that they can overlook, that they can have us take care of, and they'd be all the better for it.
So what would you say to a lot of people who are in that space, who are currently working at companies where they could easily move over to a new platform and sort of take care of that need, right, through a service? What types of areas should they be focusing on to add the most leverage and the most value and maintain that kind of culture of, or that ethos you said around, hacking?
Well, I mean, they can help us make it better. I mean, there's still difficult problems to solve in the space of web development or web deployment and scaling all of these things. If we're all working towards automating that away, it's that classic thing that if robots, take jobs away from humans, in manual labor, that kind of thing, maybe the jobs then are to, create the robots. It's all working on top of itself, building on top of itself to make more and more things automated, to make things easy, and to take away the trivial problems.
So you seem to think that even launching, let's say, a mobile application, if it, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 today even, it's going to just continue to decrease over time.
Right.
But as these tools become more automated.
Absolutely. I mean, the parts that we can automate out, I mean, if you have dramatic growth, let's say you get 1 million users in a day, you want to make your app better and better. You don't want to be up all night trying to migrate your database or to scale your web servers, anything like that. It should just keep working, and you should keep focusing on getting more and more users.
So the final question would be, is let's say you decided after this today to start a mobile application company, right?
Sure.
How would you set it up in terms of like what skills would you hire for in terms of building for that, and what would you just outsource on the development side?
Obviously, I'd use Heroku to power the web side of things. And on top of that, I mean, there's a whole ecosystem around Heroku to automate things like, sending emails and all of that. So if you get all the DevOps stuff away, really what I'm looking for are people who have a talent for making beautiful things, well, on iOS, that's my preferred platform, and then being able to translate that into the web in interesting ways too. So people who have kind of the whole package. I like generalists and T-shaped people, but people who have a large domain of knowledge and are able to contribute into this kind of larger conversation of what we're trying to build.
Great. Well, Matt, thanks for coming in, sharing your views.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.